Good morning. This is Mrs. Vogt, and this should be the first day of your notes. So hopefully you talked yesterday with, or even today with Ms. Harrod or myself or Ms. Delmont, and they talked about taking good notes. So at the top of your notebook, you're going to need to write, this is our unit 1, we're talking about linear equations. You're going to be writing equations in standard form, point slope form, and slope intercept form. And then you need to make sure that you leave some space on your paper. We have chosen the left side for you to write any questions. So you should write those and maybe highlight them. So when you come to your synchronous portion of class, you have questions to ask. And if you come across and you didn't have room, a post-it note is a good thing to do too. So we are going to get started on our first day of notes. Is September 11th, but you should put the day that you are taking notes here. And then it would probably be a good idea for you to highlight maybe the fact that this is your notes versus your homework. You could use a different color pen if that made sense to you. So whatever makes most sense to you, but you should label things notes versus homework, especially when you're turning in to any of your teachers, myself or Miss Delmont or Miss Harrod. It's easier for us to tell which things are your notes and which are your homework if you label them for us. So that'll make everything a lot easier. So before we get started, I thought we should remind ourselves of the different types of formulas there are. And they all say something kind of important in their name. Well, standard doesn't really, but point slope, for example, contains a point and a slope. So your formula is y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. Okay, and in here you will notice that there is a point, and the point is x1, y1, so that's your point. And your slope, and I used P for point here, your slope is that letter M. Okay, so that's point and slope. All right, slope intercept form is the one that you guys all just love. It's your y equals mx plus b. It has your slope m, and b, this is your y-intercept. Okay, and this seems to be everybody's favorite version. And then standard has some different letters. It's ax plus by equals c, or you'll sometimes see it like this, ax plus by minus c equals 0. So they both have a b in them, and that's a little bit weird, but I hope that you notice that the b in this one is a big B and the B in this one is a little b. They are not the same, okay? So this b does not stand for the intercept. When you are in standard form, and I'm running out of room a little bit, this always seems to happen to me. Standard form has x and y on the same side. And there are no fractions allowed in this one. Okay, so those are two really important things to remember about standard form. So that's why they, some people will see it with the C and then equals to 0. Either way, I don't have a preference, but just so you know about that. And then slope formula, remember this is that letter M, is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. You might also see it as the change in y over the change in x, and that little triangle means change or delta. Okay, so as we are going through this, let's see, we are going to start with an example here where I have find the equation of the line through these 2 points and write it in all 3 forms. Yikes. So if it helps you when you get started, label these as your x1, y1, and your x2, y2. Pretty soon you'll get good at it. Now, if you want to ask right now, okay, what is the difference? What if I labeled negative 2, 4 as my, x2, y2, and 5, 11 as my x1, y1. That's okay as long as you stay consistent. So it doesn't matter which one is number 1 and which one is number 2, as long as you stay consistent. So the first thing we're going to need to do for all of these is to find the slope. So the slope here is, let's work on that. And we're going to do y to 11 minus 4. And then we have 5 minus -2. So hopefully you remember when you subtract a negative, these both turn to plus. So 11 minus 4. And one thing you'll learn really fast about Mrs. Vogt is that although she's a math teacher, she likes to make like arithmetic mistakes. So you should always be checking my work for me. So I think I'm messing up already. That should be 7. So 7. I don't know why it changes pens on me like the second I go to erase. So let's try to get back to this. 7, and then 5 plus 2 is 7. So my slope is positive 1. So that's pretty easy for our first one, right? So I always start with the point slope formula. Why is that? Because I have a point. I actually have 2 points, and I have a slope. So I'm going to start in point slope formula. Let's see. So I'm going to label it point slope so you know. So I'm going to write it down for myself. Y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. So you need to choose one of these points. Maybe you want to choose one right now before I do. I'm going to do 5, 11. You could choose -2, 4, and you would get the same answer as me. So my y1 in this case is 11. Okay, so the y and the x stay there. You need an x and a y in your final answer. And the m we said was 1, our slope. And then I have parentheses, x minus 5. What I'm going to do next is distribute. So I have y minus 11 equals 1x minus 5. Okay, this, guys, is point slope formula. You did it. Okay, then I got super excited to change into slope intercept because I like that the best. So now I'm moving into slope intercept here, and you will see that when I add 11 to both sides here, I get y equals x plus 6. Again, that's everybody's favorite. Okay, here's the one that we all struggle with. How do I write this in standard form? And I'm down to my summary, but I'm going to give myself a little more room. Okay, how do I write this in standard form? Now remember I said that the x and the y need to be on the same side. Here's another important point. The x, this a, this coefficient, hopefully you remember that word from last year, needs to be positive. So if I'm looking at my formula, my equation here, I've got this, and if I just did some algebra and moved this over, what would happen is that our x would be negative. So that's okay. It's not a big deal, right? So now I've got this. And I said no fractions. Really exciting for me. There are no fractions, but I've got to change this. So I'm going to multiply everything on both sides by -1. And that's a like sneaky algebra move I'm going to do to make my leading coefficient on the left side turn positive. So now I've got a positive x minus y equals -6. And if you see this, which some of them are like this, these would be equal to each other. This is our standard form. Y-intercepts, I try really hard not to make my videos too long, but I can tell today that I am already struggling to keep it pretty short. So for x and y intercepts, remember the x-intercept, y will be 0. And the y-intercept, the x will be 0. So that's something that I kind of forget from time to time. But if you think about it, you want to know where it crosses the x. So you need that x value. So to find the x-intercept, you're going to plug in. So let me get a pen here. You are going to plug in for the x-intercept. You're going to plug in 0. for y. So right here, so I'm going to say 0 equals 2/5 x plus 16. I'm going to subtract 16 from both sides. Okay, and hopefully remember, how do we, if you will, get rid of this? That's probably not the right math term. But I'm going to do this in one step and multiply both sides by 5 halves. So what I get is 16, negative 16 divided by 2 should be negative 8 times 5. I believe I get negative 40. And again, like I said, Miss Vogt is good at making arithmetic errors, so please always point it out to me. If you'd like to write it like this, that's okay. But your x-intercept then is negative 40, 0. And of course, you could graph this to determine if Mrs. Vogt was right or not. I'm going to move down a little and find my y-intercept. So again, I'm into my summary page. Whoops, a little too far. My y-intercept, I'm going to plug in 0 for x. I'm struggling here. So the y-intercept, plug in x equals 0. So I'm going to say y equals 2/5 times 0 plus 16. This one's nice and easy. 0 times anything is 0, so y equals 16. And your y-intercept then is 0, comma 16. When you find x and y-intercepts for something in standard form, it's this is my favorite way. So you can plug in, but I like to make a t-table here and tell myself I'm plugging in 0 for x on one of them and 0 for y on one of them. So when I plug in 0 for x, my 4x turns to 0. So now I have the equation, and I wish that I could show you that. I usually take my finger and just cover up the 4x part, but of course you can't see that. So then I have negative 6y. So if I'll just show my work over here. Then I have 0, so I have negative 6y equals 24, and it's totally messy. Divide by negative 6, divide by negative 6, and I get negative 4. And then I'll do this again and say 4x minus 6 times 0 equals 24. And then I have 4x equals 24, divide by 4, and x equals 6, and that goes here. Okay, so these kind of got, this is your x-intercept, and this is your y-intercept. But of course, finding x and y-intercepts, I think, is super easy when you are in standard form. And hopefully you have some questions for your teacher, for me. But I wrote a question over here for you to think about. Can an equation not have an x-intercept or not have a y-intercept? And there might be some homework problems like that that come up. So really think about what kind of lines wouldn't have an x-intercept across the x-axis, or what kind of lines wouldn't have a y-intercept.